What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the podcast. I have an awesome guest with us today. Today, I'm speaking with Dr. Mario Amaro. He is a United States Navy veteran turned health tech founder and entrepreneur, and he founded the company Ease. He has had almost 20 years of direct patient care experience and has a passion for small business and helping clinical colleagues rediscover their autonomy and independence with an all-in-one solution for starting, growing, and managing a private practice. So, Dr. Amaro, thanks so much for coming on today.
Hey, thanks, Adam. I really appreciate you inviting me to your podcast.
Awesome. So can you, for those that haven't heard of you, just give, I guess, a little bit of your background into getting into medicine and then also into entrepreneurship and health tech, because I think that's a very unconventional route that a lot of physicians don't take.
Yeah. So my background is I initially got into medicine at a very early age. Kind of first thing I did was in high school track. I became an EMT. And then I joined the military, kind of leveraging that experience and actually went into flight medicine. And so a lot of my experiences around flight medicine, aviation medicine, I kind of really traveled all throughout the world while I was active duty in the Navy, kind of doing that job. So typically I was one of one wherever I would travel. Usually I would get in the back of a helicopter or some type of aircraft, and I would fly to a country by myself and take care anywhere from 5 people to 100 people, 200 people, really depending on how long we were going to be in country. So that's really where, my drive for healthcare really was kind of developed or born. And I got to experience so many different areas of healthcare. Military is totally different from the civilian side of healthcare, just
Right.
because you get to actually take part in things you're probably not 100% trained to do yet. And so, you could be doing so many different random things. And I think that's really what help me better understand the connections that you're supposed to have with patients, or the connections that a physician is able to really develop in a particular community. Being that this community was military, it's different, but it still provides the same value. So when I got outside of the military and it was looking to kind of go full all in practice, my views of it were totally different from what I expected my career to be. I wanted, or I kind of really was craving that relationship again, craving that relationship where I was able to reconnect with the community, be part of an organization, or have some really deep connection with it to provide my expertise, provide the level of care that I believe I could deliver to them. I didn't really experience that in what most of us kind of interact with in a hospital setting. And so that's what turned me on to, like, how could I actually solve this for us? How can I help clinicians and other physicians leave their employment and kind of return back to the communities to open up their private practice? And that's where this tech journey started. So that transition happened, over the course of just learning that reconnection. I wanted to be part of that community again.
Wow. So how long were you practicing? So you were working in the Navy, and then you got out, and were you practicing for an employer for a certain number of years, and then you switched over to starting your own private practice, or you trying to get into it?
Yeah, it was actually getting into it, trying to get into it. That's kind of where this whole started, the whole process started, because I actually started researching it for myself. And as the process of
Mm,
researching how to start it for myself, I come from a very kind of modest upbringing. My parents really don't have any formalized education. So it's not like I can just go to my family and say, "Hey, can I have a loan? Can I get some access to some capital so I can start this business?" And so that wasn't really an
right.
option for me. So I really started to research what options do exist for me to start a business. And there were too many question marks. It was nothing clear on this is the exact path on if you want to go independent, this is how you start a private practice. And so I started to ask
Yeah.
a lot of my colleagues that were ahead of me. I had, fortunately, I was in an environment that there were others who had gone the private practice route and had really great success. So I started to really just do my research, started asking tons of questions. And that led me down the path of discovering that there was no tech solution. There was really nothing out there that actually helped physicians start a practice. So I would say it was from my own self discovery of not having a solution for myself that actually drove me to say, well, this is me, this is my path, or this will be my path, and I need to solve this for other physicians like me who are looking to leave hospital employment, or, they are looking to make that transition when their training is done. So that way they could actually go and start their own business.
Right. That sounds like me. I'm that second target audience, and I felt something similar. I mean, I'm still in residency now, but I'm constantly trying to figure out the best way and different things I need to do to start a private practice. And I feel like there's just not a lot of information out there, at least compiled into one resource. Like maybe you can talk to people who have been there, but I'm looking for YouTube clicks. Is there a book on it? Like there's no real nice consolidated place to go to figure out, okay, what's everything that I need to do to start this practice? So that's awesome that you're creating essentially that solution. So then did you end up going into practice, or you ended up then going right into health tech, and this is what you've been doing over the last number of years?
Yeah, I transitioned full time into the tech startup world. Yeah, so it was a perfect opportunity for me to be able to say, all right, am I going left or am I going right? And so that's kind of how the transition happened. I'm just like, this is my path. I could, I've had, my wife was in tech for a very long time prior to kind of me even, making the transition. And so I asked her, I'm like, hey, look, if we end up doing this, or if I end up going in the sense of going left and continuing down, practicing, we may not be in Houston. We're from Houston. We may have to move and relocate to a different state. And this may be kind of our way of life, or we can stay here in Houston and I just go right and go the full, tech route, and I see what comes of this. And so we had a timeline. I gave myself a couple of years to see if anything would come from it. Fortunately, we did see some success. We always have been able to have clinicians interested, other physicians interested in what we're doing. In 2021, we were able to raise some VC capital. And so we just kind of continued along the journey of really solving this kind of pain point for physicians who wanted to start their own private practices.
That's awesome. Super exciting. Raising money, like starting this health tech company that is clearly there's a need for. So going into that, can you explain exactly what Ease does? It seems like it helps with various aspects of setting up a private practice, but can you go more into the details of what you're providing as a solution for physicians?
Yeah, so Ease, essentially what we do is, what makes us unique is that we actually build practices from the ground up. And so we're not just kind of telling, a physician who's interested, okay, well, go figure out how to actually start the business and then come to us and we'll give you some tech solution in order to deliver care. That's kind of what EHRs have done. Even though EHRs market themselves as a way to practice medicine, they don't actually do anything to help you start a practice. And so when you come to Ease, the first thing that we do is we actually do the incorporation. Because that's the foundation for you as a professional entity, is that you actually need to set up the incorporation for your business that actually calls you a care delivery or a private practice that delivers care to patients. And so once you get on that journey, I think there is a misnomer when it comes to EHRs as practice management. Practice management kind of labeled as business management, but technically what they're talking about is the care delivery aspect of a private practice, not the business operations. And so from there, we kind of make sure that your business as a practice is actually a business and operational as a business. So the incorporation, the legal, the payroll, the bookkeeping, the accounting, your finances when it comes to how do you get paid? Is it insurance? Is it direct care? Is it payment processing, all those things that really matter as a business itself. If you're not generating revenue, you're not understanding the finances behind how is the revenue happening when it comes to operating the cost of your business. We tend to forget about all those things. And so that's really kind of what the core is for Ease. You come to us, we're going to make sure all the legal aspects and all the financial aspects of your business are already solved. And, we're able to give you that solution that you need to actually grow it. And so that's in the core, if you wanted to say like what it is that we do, we provide the actual infrastructure you need to maintain it as a business.
It's really all the back end stuff that a company would need, right? You're not going to be, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's not as much the front end, like helping a company build a website or the EHR itself, but everything else that goes into the back end of managing a private practice as a business is what you guys are providing.
Yeah, so we actually do. So the biggest difference behind what we believe is important with our business is not necessarily the front office aspect of care delivery. Like why we don't necessarily market that. So if I could take a step back and say, what are we? If you were to draw a
Sure.
comparison, we're essentially the Shopify for doctors' practices. So if you think about what does Shopify
Okay.
deliver, right? We deliver very similar technology, just geared towards private practices. So the difference between how Shopify kind of like makes it its main marketing kind of, product value, we believe that you don't have to train a doctor how to deliver. You already know that. We're just going to give you the tools
Mm-hmm.
that you need actually to deliver care. So that's your website, your scheduling, your EHR, all those things. To me, that is not true necessarily the things that anyone has to be taught how to use, because we're kind of familiar with it going through the process
Right.
of becoming a physician. And so what we believe is really the core of your business is the back office. So that's why we promote the back office. So when you come
Right.
to us, we call ourselves the all in one. So you're literally going to get everything that you need to deliver care for the patient care and everything that you need to operate as a business. So we kind of bundle all that together, and it allows you to be able to figure out which direction your business is growing. But the reason why your business is growing is because you actually understand the operations of your back office. If you didn't have that incorporated,
Mm-hmm.
you wouldn't really know how to grow it, or when was the appropriate time to hire another clinician, maybe add a different location, maybe go virtual to brick and mortar. And so those are the kind of different things that we are providing with our platform to physicians who are thinking about starting a practice.
Got it. So if I, let's say, was using Ease for my practice, and I take various different insurances, are you helping with that process of collecting insurance claims?
Yeah, so every model is going to be different, right? And I think this is why what we say. So to answer your question directly, yes, 100% we will. But it also depends on what your practice model is. Not every practice model is going to want to accept insurance payments. And so when you come to Ease, really it's about what is your specific model that you're looking to launch to your particular patients. And so that's why starting with the incorporation as a core allows us to be able to dictate how exactly is your business going to look like when you actually launch it, and then how are you looking to scale it. And so when we think about, for example, direct care, if you're just looking to accept cash only in a membership kind of
Right.
like model, then insurance is not important to you, right? You really don't need to factor any of that into it. But if you're looking to actually have a model where insurance is important, you do need to get credentialed and paneled with the insurance payer, then claims is super important to your business, and you need to make sure that that's built into your back
Mm-hmm.
office. And so those are the aspects that we're kind of talking about. So it really is choose your own path. What type of model are you looking to do? And that's where our infrastructure is. It's what's called modular. It allows you to be able to pick and choose to actually launch your business that makes sense for your
Mm-hmm.
practice style.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Very cool. And I know, and going back, you were saying like one of the first things you would do is incorporate the business. So I noticed, I was looking at your website and I didn't even realize this before. There's a PLLC versus just LLC. Do you recommend that for all most private practices that are starting to be professional limited liability companies?
Yeah, so it really it's state dependent. Not every state requires you to
Okay.
have a PLLC. Some states have different varying requirements on what you could list your name, for example, who could be a owner, right? Sometimes they mandate that only a physician or other clinician can actually be the owner. They can't
Mm-hmm.
be any other owners. So it really depends on the state that you're incorporating in. This is why we always say that's the foundation. So when you're thinking about starting a business, we want to make sure that your business is compliant and that we're giving you all the tools that you need to be able to understand what is your business model. Because just because we say the term private practice, not every private practice is the exact same, right? And there are
Right.
nuances built into it depending on the business model. How do you intend to get paid? right? And so if PLOC is a requirement in your state, we will tell you that, when you come to build with us, and then we would go ahead and do the incorporation of filing behind it. But here's a thing that a lot of kind of new practice owners don't understand, that we tend to try to educate them on, is that there is an important document called your operating agreement when you file your actual business entity. And that operating agreement is generally what states your business model, meaning like, this is my style of practice, and these are kind of who in the practice is providing care and what type of care. And so it outlines your business. What does your business do? And often that has to be custom to your business, right? We can create templates to help
Right.
streamline that process, but overall, that's what protects you. That's what protects your business as a whole. And so that really needs to be built that in a special way for your business. So that's why we tend to make sure that every practice that builds with us, that is outlined appropriately to the particular practice model or business model they intend to launch.
Got it. So one example, if I can, like a thought experiment, let's say we're using me as an example. I live in New York City. I'm going to be finishing residency. I'm interested in sports medicine, so I may start a practice in the city doing sports medicine. Now, it's very expensive to start a practice in the city. So let's say I'll take out a bank loan, whether SBA loan, things like that, but I might also need to raise some capital. So my assumption from what I've read, and you correct me if I'm wrong, is to raise capital, if it's someone outside of being a physician, I'll have to have my private practice filed, and I'd have to have an MSO, right? Because if you're a non-physician, you can only technically invest in the MSO. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what that type of relationship looks like? And is that what you were referring to when you said an operating agreement, or is that separate?
Yeah, so the operating agreement is separate from, it actually is part of the
Thank
entity
you.
itself, right? So when you go to
Okay.
file the initial professional entity, then, and by the way, it's called professional entity because you hold a professional license, right? And so every
Right.
professional state has its own professional license requirements for people who hold that licensure, who need to file or create a business type in a certain way. For example, in New York that you mentioned, you have the Department of Labor, right? That's connected to the Department of Education. And so the Department of Education will control
Mm-hmm.
how it looked like for you starting a business based off of you being a professional person who holds a licensure, right? A professional license. And so you
Right.
right now, like in the state of New York, if you wanted to file, it would take you roughly about 4 months, 4 to 6 months, in order to actually complete that incorporation process. And it's because it has to go through
Wow.
multiple different checkpoints in multiple different departments for them to be approved, because there's a lot of people who have some say so in that process, right? They implemented those rules and requirements of incorporating your business. And so, but that's the difference between an operating agreement. Operating agreement is just part of your actual business entity, like just totally separated from,
Mm-hmm.
the investor part that you're talking about, right? Now, the operating agreement is a little bit different from what's called your articles of incorporation, articles of organization. And not to go too technical here, but that generally will list like who's owners,
No,
right?
please do. The
Who,
more technical, the
yeah,
better.
yeah, but those articles would, every state calls them something different, but still, it's the articles meant to
Mm-hmm.
say who is the owner here, right? Who is who
Right.
owns this business, or who is a member, or sometimes the LLCs are called single member LLCs. So generally, there's only kind of like
Right.
one owner. If it's multiple owners, then they'll list it. So, but that's kind of the difference. Now, to your point of, you wanted to go seek investment, right, for your business, right? Technically, due to what's called the
Mm-hmm.
corporate practice of medicine, you other corporations cannot technically own a business that is a medical business that delivers care. And the reason
Right.
why is because shareholders should not be able to dictate how care is delivered to patients. Because if you're only kind of pushing off of profits or things like that, then it can manipulate the care that's being delivered. Therefore, patients may not get quality care, or care that is actually best suited for them. And they're, kind of think about like the Hippocratic Oath, right? It's like it's
No,
taking away
I
from
hear
the
I hear
people. Yeah,
what the purpose is. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. And so
With
what has been done? Oh, go ahead.
No, I was gonna go off on a tangent because I was gonna say, with that said, then it's ironic that physicians can't own hospitals, but that's a conversation maybe we'll have in a little bit. But going back to the MSO aspect, so what people have done, like, right, because there's obviously a lot of private equity in healthcare, they're investing in the MSO that does the business side of the practice, correct? And then there's an operating or some sort of agreement, maybe operating agreement, it's not the right word, between the private practice itself, the clinical component, and then the MSO.
Yeah, so generally what happens when an MSO, and there are multiple terms with the MSO. We kind of, the MSO is just kind of widely
Mm-hmm.
known, but there are different variations of this. And so what happens is that the actual entity itself, right? So there's two separate kind of corporate structures. The main entity, right, that says the business exists, like what the purpose of the business is, that's typically who undergoes the business operations. Like they were the ones that do the
Mm-hmm.
contracting. They'll do, the selection of maybe software or whatever it may be. They'll take the investments. That is the main structure that would do that, and then they'll open up some type of group or managed group, where it actually contracts or employs the doctors or other types of clinicians. And so that is
Mm-hmm.
that entity where they will form some type of operating agreement between one another, where they are saying this
Mm-hmm.
business is completely separated, so therefore it's not dictating the level of care or the standard of care. So it allows the separate entity that where the doctors and the other clinicians are working for, to be able to operate independently, right? So that way there's no sway in the
Mm-hmm.
process. So that's kind of how those structures work. So if you were like, you see it all the time with startups, right? They'll form the initial Delaware C Corp. They will establish themselves as that's where they receive the funding. And then they'll use that funding to form a separate entity, typically some type of managed group. Under the managed group, they'll have a contract where the clinicians will come and be employed of or part of, and then they will
Mm-hmm.
receive care. So you go to any like telemedicine or gig model, right? Gig startup. You go to the bottom of their
Mm-hmm.
website and you look at their agreements. You will see where they'll talk about the managed group, and that the clinicians or
Mm-hmm.
physicians who are seeing and providing the care are part of that group and not part of the main structure, the main entity. And so that's kind of how it works. It's more
Right.
expensive, a lot more taxes, but that's kind of the way that they do it to avoid the corporate practice of medicine and other aspects that kind of cause the difference between where they cannot directly employ them.
Right. So can then you have, like, for example, let's say I was trying to get money for my practice, besides taking out a bank loan, would that be one recommendation that you guys would, or one strategy that you guys would help set up so that I can take, let's say, friends and family who wanted to invest so that I could have the funds to help start that practice? Is that something you see a lot, or is most physicians really just taking out a bank loan to start?
Yeah, so honestly, we don't see a lot of physicians start receiving bank loans just because it's not necessarily being an option for them. It's not like most will not have the option to be able to apply for a bank loan. And the only time that you do is when you are, you mentioned SBA earlier, and it's when you're thinking
Mm-hmm.
about some type of commercial real estate. And so it has to be a heavy asset where the bank is looking at it from a longer term, and they're trying to say, okay, there is
Mm-hmm.
actually some value here of giving you capital. If you're just like coming out, oh, I want 50K, 100K, they're more likely going to deny you and tell you to come back until you have some more, at least 6 months of like recurring revenue or some collection revenue. They're able to say, all right, we'll give you access to some funds, but it's more working capital than actually startup
Right.
capital. And it's not really going to be enough to give you what you need to open multiple
Uh-huh.
locations. So that's why typically when people do receive, and physicians, when they're thinking about starting practices, um, they have to, or typically will get an SBA loan with commercial real estate on top, attached to it.
Hmm. So how else so basically, because they're going to say we're going to buy this commercial real estate, they'll be able to get the loan because there's a hard asset. So if they're not doing that, how are you finding that most physicians who want to start a practice are getting the capital to do so?
Yeah, so unfortunately, they kind of have to, do it bootstrapped. It's pretty common for most physicians to be able to bootstrap now, and it's one of the issues that we are actively trying to solve. That's why, kind of, when you ask me what it is that we do, it's just like I can be say, oh, we provide the infrastructure you need to start a practice. I could say that, right? I can say, okay, what's the infrastructure? Scheduling, EHRs, but that's technically what we provide. But the value is we are trying to collect as much financial data so that way we could help provide a better underwriting model that's built specifically for private practice. That way we can actually, you know, give doctors and other clinicians who are thinking about starting their practices access to startup capital that's made for their businesses. Because right now, you go to a bank, they
Hmm.
don't have anything built specifically for you. They're going to try to utilize old financial data from 20, 30 years ago to say, all right, do you fit within this box? And we know that the models of care that are kind of like starting to come out, more digital health, more hospital at home, all these different things, like they can't finance it. They can't give you capital for it. And that's the issue. So we're trying to come up with a better, underwriting financial model. So when doctors want to start practices, they not only can get the infrastructure they need from us, but they can actually get a loans, they can get working capital, get growth capital, get all the money they need to actually run their businesses because we understand it.
Hmm.
We know exactly how to build it. We know exactly what's required. And so hopefully it, you know, over the next couple of years, this will actually be a kind of full one stop solution for you. You want to start a business? What type of business are you? You apply for it, you get loan, you get access right now, you get all the details of what the deal is, and
Mm.
you choose yes or no. Everything is there for you. That's kind of like the big vision.
Yeah.
But to your point of where you were
Very
coming
cool.
from, it's super hard.
Got it. So I guess I'll take this two ways. First, so it sounds like ease. Your goal long is also to be the bank or the lenders that can provide capital for startup private practices, because it seems like the big issue and one of the reasons it's hard for a lot of people to make that jump from being an employee to having their own businesses. There's no way to start and get those initial funds because it can be, I mean, in New York City, I was looking, I'm sure like rents could be $10,000 a month for a space. Where are you going to get the funds to start that if you can't just get a loan for it, or and it seems like a very complicated to raise capital unless you have this MSO structure, which seems possible, but you said
That's
less
the
likely
issue,
for just
right?
like
So
sole
if you think
proprietor
about it,
physicians.
if you look at it, why aren't physicians leaving their employment jobs even if they're not happy, right? And so they're not doing because they understand the risk, and it's not favorable for them if they have to first. We have to go through the process of waiting 4 to 6 months to incorporate, right? That's nothing that Ease can do to be able to accelerate that in the state of New York. And then now you have to come up with a marketing plan, all these different things, and compete with larger hospital systems for patients. And then in addition to that, you have to figure out how you're going to get capital, and more likely you're going to have a bootstrap. Because that means you're going to have to maintain some type of side employment to be able to fund your business. And so all these things are basically
Mm-hmm.
friction, right? They're hoops that you have to jump around just to gain your independence. And so what Ease is doing is slowly we're just going like literally like friction point by friction point and just knocking it down and say, all right, we eliminated that. All right, next step, let's eliminate the next thing, right? And so this is kind of where we're at. We're saying solving corporations. We offer banking already, right? So when you start with us, we provide a banking solution because that's part of your back office. And so what else can we do to eliminate a friction point to get you into practice? And that is eventually underwriting and giving you access to startup capital. So that way you could start your business from the ground up, right? And so, you know, those will vary. If you're looking at a brick and mortar, then you obviously need a little bit more capital, especially in cities like New York. If you're looking just to operate a virtual practice, your need of capital should be near zero, right? It's because you're
Pretty
virtual.
low, right? Yeah. That's a good point. So what would you, so what, I mean, maybe you don't have this data, but I'm sure you guys are privy to a lot of information in terms of what it's costing for brick and mortar. Like what would you say in big cities like New York, Miami, San Francisco, what are you seeing like the typical amount someone would need to try and start a private practice if they're going to be brick and mortar?
The average, you need a minimum of I would say 100K is generally what people would say is that you need in order to start it. Now, this is not like you're not actually adding the capital cost you need to get profitable, right? Because you have to build that value or that amount of money to operate basically your cogs, right? To keep you operational until you hit some level of profitability that where you can actually start paying that back. So that's why when you take out a large loan, they're going to build that into your model of I'm going to be, basically spending until I hit a particular point in my my cycle of my business where I actually start generating revenue. You're not necessarily profitable, but you're not actually burning either, and so you're able to start actually making those payments.
Hmm.
So that's why most of the time, so to your question, is 100K generally is what we estimate and what we have seen, but it can get higher depending on the type of business that you're looking to do. If you're a surgeon, you require more equipment, other things like that, more staff, then your costs are going to increase.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking like, for example, let's say I'd use the sports medicine example. It's more non-operative sports. I'd need an ultrasound machine that could be like 20,000 plus, maybe an EMG machine if I'm doing EMGs, maybe one or two office staff. I mean, that's way more than $100,000, right? That plus rent in the city.
Yeah, and then you have to incorporate your own fees, right? You have to pay yourself, right? So it's very hard as a new
Yeah.
entrepreneur not to think about. You have to have it in keep in mind your lifestyle, right? What sort of lifestyle, what sort of debt obligations do you have yourself that you would need to be able to generate a particular amount of funds or revenue per month to pay what you expect to get paid. And so I think there are ways around it, and we've been working with a lot of different practices who are thinking about scaling up. Maybe initially you don't have an actual brick and mortar location that is yours. There are in New York, there are several options to be able to utilize co-working space, and so it's more of
Yeah,
a
I've seen
leaner
this. There's
model
like
for doing it.
WeWorks
Yeah.
of private practice now.
Yeah, which is excellent, and those are great solutions to be able to be leaner as you start to grow your business. And so I think that the old traditional model of immediately going to market with you owning the physical location is probably not best just because costs are higher. And then it's harder at this point to gain access to funds, and so you need to be a little bit more smarter in the process of what the model looks like when you actually launch your business, and then as your business starts to scale up, then you establish that brick and mortar. You're able to actually find a better location, maybe understand a different part of the city that will be best for your patient demographic, and then that's where you go all in, right? And so hopefully by that time,
Right.
as we continue to grow, we have more access to capital to help those businesses expand.
Right, right. Now, however, on the other hand, so because I think that's an interesting strategy, especially like you almost can start telehealth, build up a patient pool, have occasional, basically a couple times a month where you're seeing patients in person at one of these uh, co-working spaces for private practices. But at that point, you don't have the hard asset to actually apply for the SBA loan. So only once you're going to have like purchase some real estate, then is that when you would recommend applying for the SBA loan?
Yeah, you actually don't. So there are several different financing options that will fund you once you have minimum $100,000 in revenue. So the general requirements are 6 months. You need 6 months of actual something on the books to show progression of the business.
Mm.
And then you need X number. So some of them can be 80K, other ones could be up to 120K, 200K, right? It really depends, where they'll give you like a line of credit or they'll give you an actual kind of like a full amount of loan to be able to expand the business. So it's, if
Mm-hmm.
you're looking to get funded immediately, right, before you have any patients, right, before you've actually started the
Yeah.
business, most of the time you are going to have a brick and mortar. So think who's a prime example of that is like dentistry. You see a lot of dentists who will go and find a location first and then get a loan for that particular location plus the build out and the equipment that's needed. So
Right.
because it's a proven model, you'll have a lot of banks that will give you capital if you meet the funding requirements early on. Now, if you use that lean strategy where you use a co-working space, all they're going to look is your balance sheet. So now they're actually evaluating the business as a real business because you've already been generating revenue, right? And so that's how they'll
Mm-hmm.
access or give you access to capital. And so if your ambition is, an actual real estate, meaning that you want to purchase it, you can move into it. But if it's just you're leasing it, you'll have access to capital because you just proved that your business is profitable. You have a good business plan on how you're going to continue to expand it. And so some banks will be a little bit more likely to fund you at that point versus starting from zero, right? If you're just saying, I just
Mm-hmm.
need some capital, I'm going to start, very few banks are going to do that just because they don't understand that model and you don't have anything on your to show, right? You'll have no revenue, no kind of patience, no marketing, all these different things to be able to show proof
Mm-hmm.
for them to give you access to capital.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it is like a very interesting catch-22 though, because it's like, how do you do that without your, especially back in the day? I mean, now telehealth makes it easier,
Yeah.
but it's how do you do that if you don't have the brick and mortar location? But it seems like you can get funding for the brick and mortar if you have the business plan and you are able to show like this is real estate that you're purchasing. It's a hard asset, so the bank's more comfortable with that overall versus you're just going to be leasing the space and then you don't own the hard asset.
Yeah, it's not to say that they're not financial institutions that will not fund that. It's just it's harder, right? If you're
Yeah.
thinking about going that route, the likelihood that you will spend and waste time going through the funding options, it's going to be harder for you just because banks don't understand how to really finance practices. And that's because the underwriting model they're using, it's old. It's from, when brick
Right.
and mortar was primarily brick and mortar, and that's just not how it works today for all types of physicians. And so if you're a
Mm-hmm.
surgeon specifically, the high cost of your services, that there's a demand in your area, you probably will have easier access to getting funding versus someone who's a primary care doc who's looking to open up a brick and mortar, and they're probably going to tell you no.
Right. Got it. Got it. Cool. So switching gears a little bit, what are some of the trends that you're seeing then overall in terms of private equity getting into healthcare versus people or physicians going and opening up independent practices? It seems like the pendulum was swinging into the direction of all these practices being bought up by corporate medicine or big health systems or academic institutions. Do you see the pendulum coming back at all? And I guess that is one of the purposes of ease, right? Is to get that pendulum swinging back in the direction of ownership by the physicians.
Yeah, so we're all aware, private equity has, and it actually started in the early 2000s where the hospital systems were the ones kind of acquiring, private practices, where the early boomers and ones that owned those businesses kind of really use it as a nest egg to be able to sell it off, right? Where
Right.
previously they were selling it to other physicians, right? And so a doctor would
Mm.
come in and buy the practice as opposed to a health system coming in and buy the practice, right? So that is behavior that shifted. Physicians selling practices has always been default. When someone will start the business, they will be like, all right, I have a growing business, I have a patient panel that's active, I have a good collections happening month over month. I can show you that this is a good business to purchase. Now, who am I going to sell this business to? Sometimes they'll have a new doctor come in, they'll become partner, and eventually that person will take over completely, right?
We'll like
Or
phase out.
someone,
Yeah.
a doctor, exactly, or a doctor would come in and just outright buy it. That's how private practice stayed private practice, because there was a kind of pipeline, right? And so what happened is the hospital systems came in. They kind of were the first to go, and purchase during this what we call the M&A wave, and then private equity came in and started doing it after them, right? And so now there's not a lot of supply where new doctors coming in can purchase an existing business and then kind of modernize it in a sense, right? To help kind of
Right.
help that business grow. And so you
Yeah.
have a group of people who are high debt, all these things, and where banks aren't really funding anymore, all this stuff. And so now you have to start from the ground up, which is a lot harder for them to be able to do versus coming in and becoming partner and then eventually owning it or buying the
Right.
business. It's so much easier to buy existing businesses profitable or at least generating revenue.
Just because you're saying as a individual, you can go get a loan to do that because it's already an asset that is producing revenue.
100%, 100%. Yeah, and there's way
Yeah.
more banks and financial institutions who are going to be willing to play that game than bank that's going to say, "Oh, you want to start a business from the ground up? There's nothing that you have to prove that this business is going to work, where I'm going to give you money to be successful," right? It's a lot easier to say, "Hey, look, no, there's a
Mm-hmm.
business. This guy wants to retire, right? Look how many patients he has. Look how much money he has. Look at the marketing and
Right. Right.
it's the control of the market. It makes more sense why someone would give someone else money to do that. And so
Right.
and I think that because that doesn't exist, private equity was able to do it because they literally go raise funds. So when you go and raise funds as
Right.
a
They just
private
have
equity
the
from
capital, and they could give.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sure they could, like, now too, even if you wanted to buy out a business as a doctor, you're not going to be able to give them same multiples that the private equity companies are going to be able to offer to that retiring physician who wants to sell and get out.
Yeah, especially if they're a high end, kind of practice, right? Like the specialty practice, whether it's like dermatology, the ones that they were buying up, the ophthalmology, and so it's
Mm.
it's it's harder, right? You're not going to do it as fast enough, right? You're going to have to go through the process. Maybe you're interested. Could take 6 months to 12 months to be able to purchase that business versus private equity comes in and says, we'll have you out within 90 days or something, And so, and then sometimes they'll even sell them and
Mm.
say, you can continue doing this. And then you become an employee, right? So you get a payout plus you maintain, right? Some type of, continuously, salary, or you get some equity. They sell you with equity, afterwards. So there's different strategies they'll take to really incentivize a physician selling their business that outcompetes new physicians coming in who want to buy those businesses. But I
Right.
think there's an even greater opportunity for us to be able to create a new on ramp, leveraging our technology that we've built, and then providing access to actually funding solutions to help more start as employees and then gradually help you scale up to something in a leaner model to where ownership is
Mm.
actually available. We give you just a better solution to become an employee to a practice owner. And so that's kind of what we're working on.
So interesting. Can we go into that a little bit more? So you're saying a practice, let's say a practice that already exists that uses ease, that ease will also be helpful for the employee that gets hired by that practice. How so?
No, I'm actually talking about it. Right now we know that more doctors are more doctors are employees and business owners, right? And so
Right. Right.
what we intend to solve is how can we get those doctors who are employees to at least try private practice without necessarily going into
Got it.
private practice.
Got it.
Yeah.
So they can do it like full. I see. So they're using ease so they can at least get started. They're still maintaining their employer or employee position somewhere else. And then once they have enough revenue and feel stable enough where they can make the full jump, then they make the full jump.
Yeah, because we have to think about what is preventing people from, if they're employed, we get the concept, you steady paycheck, things like that. But I don't think that's enough, actually. I think that there is no what we call try before you buy concept for private practice for the new doctors coming in. And so if we can
Mm-hmm.
create a on-ramp
Right.
solution to let you try before you buy, where you're able to say, all right, I run some type of business while I'm still technically employed to have the benefit of both without the actual full obligations of private practice, right? And so you're able to understand how to run a business. You're able to understand a little bit of marketing. You're able to understand a little bit of branding, right? Until you really discover, is this for me, right? And so once you start to
Mm-hmm.
say, all right, you know what, I actually do enjoy this. What can ease do to create different funding incentives to actually cause you to say, I want to quit my job and I want to go full time. And so that's where we
Right.
are coming up with those solutions to help incentivize people to actually make that transition. Because we know
Mm-hmm.
more doctors are employees. We get it. It's the data is real. So the idea is we also know that the default behavior for most doctors is independence. So how can we convince doctors to shift without being immediately overnight? You have to shift, right? There's no cold turkey here when you think about switching from
Right.
employment to private practice full time. We need a more on ramp system to allow them to really make the
Mm-hmm.
determination: is private practice for me or not?
So how are you saying that they're only basically dipping their toe in with by using ease while they're employed? Because one, are there non-competes that are usually preventing that? And two, like once you sign up with ease, you're technically in essence the goal is starting your own practice. So you're just not are you seeing most people are just using ease, kind of getting started learning, maybe starting an online patient panel? Like how are they just dipping their toe in instead of going head in, if that makes sense?
No, it does. And so our first kind of customer that we targeted were docs like me, and docs who were going to go in.
Right.
Initially targeted. Now our next target is docs who are employed, but they probably are not thinking of themselves as business owners, or at least starting a private practice at this point in their career. And so our goal
Mm-hmm.
is to at least get them part of the ease network, and say, hey, look, you already moonlight, you already do some type of telemedicine gig work on some random platform that you may
Mm-hmm.
have used or heard of. How
Right.
can we get you on board into ease, utilizing the same technology that when you are, if you transition to full time, it's you're already familiar with. So there's minimal training that we have to do, right? You're already familiar with the concept of what ease is. So branding, all these things that we can provide, whether it's education or, like as I mentioned, financial, kind of incentives that could say, hey, look,
Mm-hmm.
you saw 10 patients, last month, and this you generated X revenue, right? Well,
Mm-hmm.
what can we do to get you to 20 patients, 50 patients, 100 patients, right? And if that's the case, wow, you actually saw 100 patients. Would you like access to a loan? Here's the capital that we can provide you. Here's, the
Right. Right.
terms.
Kind
Would
of
you be?
like
And so, like, yeah,
no, I was gonna say Stripe does something like that similar, where they
there
when
you
they see
go.
their business doing well, all of a sudden they have an offering of like, oh, you now qualify for this amount of capital.
Exactly. That's a perfect example of what doesn't exist for on ramp, right? So this is what I'm trying to state, is that when that optionality doesn't exist for an employee, right, where you think my only option to start a private practice is I have to go all in. That's not true, right? Is there a way that we can truly provide a system that allows you to scale up so you can try before you buy, in a sense? And so when you get you're involved, you're like, okay, well, this is working, and we see it's working, then we utilize that same Stripe example that you just talked about, because Stripe does it, Shopify does it, right? You get that loan option immediately. You don't have to apply for it. Your business, we've already shown that you're capable of doing it. Now you have to click yes or no. And then what if you get to a point where you 100% are ready to quit your job because it's all aligned for you? You already have the infrastructure, you're already familiar with branding, you're already familiar with marketing, and then we just gave you access to capital. It's like, it's there, right? It's yours to own. And we believe there's an opportunity to be able to help employed physicians make that transition with a solution that's really built all in one, in that kind of like scale up process.
Very cool. Very cool. And so just to end it with this, and just to clarify, because it seems like Ease really does all these things. Is there also an EHR built in to Ease where you can be using it to see patients and record their medical information, or are you tacking on like some of these other EHRs that are out there for private practices?
Yeah, so I try to be careful of like kind of stating things is like, because I really want the focus of what Ease does to be on starting the practice and the back office components, because that's what makes it a
Right.
business. But the reality is
Gotcha.
when we say all in one, Ease delivers literally everything that you need. So when you come to Ease, right, we provide all the front and back office infrastructure you need to actually run your business and deliver care as a private practice. And so you have an EHR, you have your scheduling, you have your payments, you have your form builder, you have your assessments, you have your patient portal, all these things that you need to deliver care, it's there for you. It's all embedded. But what makes us truly unique is that we deliver the back office components that is not traditionally embedded into an EHR, right? That's your bookkeeping, your payroll, your accounting, your
Right.
taxes, your banking, and eventually your, access to capital, which does not exist when you think about practice management or EHRs. As you correctly identified, it exists in Shopify, it exists in Stripe. But why doesn't this exist in healthcare? And that's kind of the reason why we are really focusing on the back office fintech financial portions of our business, as opposed to saying, oh yeah, we do EHR, because we do, like, all that stuff is included because you need it to deliver care.
Right. Okay. Awesome. And so, are people, when they sign up for Ease, they're paying a monthly subscription? It seems like you do a lot of different customizable offers and almost like consulting with the doctors. Is there other services that are besides that monthly subscription to the website that you can access once you join, or like what's the overall ways that people should get started with you guys?
Yeah, so we only charge for the back office. We don't charge for any of the front office technology. So for the EHR components and the scheduling, the websites, we don't charge you for that. It's embedded. It's included into your all-in-one offering. So if you want to start a business, there's really two ways to do it. You're either a solo practitioner, a solo doc who wants to start your own solo practice, or you're a group practice that wants to start your own group practice. So there's options that we have. It's we try to make it as easy as possible. And so if you come in as a solo doc, it's $299 a month. If you come in as a group practice, it starts at $499 a month. And then we do charge an additional fee per clinician that you have as part of the group practice. So if you have multiple doctors, then you will pay additional fee, right, on top of that base $499. But at least it gets you in the door. You understand how much this costs, right? And that includes your
Right.
incorporation. So when you pay that fee, we will do the incorporation as part of that monthly fee that you're paying month over month. So it's all bundled into that pricing, because that's really what we believe is a huge friction point. Because if we start adding each additional cost over and over, we in ourselves become a friction point, and we limit people from actually moving forward. But there was a question that you asked earlier that I failed to mention, which is what are we seeing trending? What we're seeing trending is more docs starting as a group at day 0, which is different from how it used to be. More docs are coming together to
Interesting.
kind of share the cost of starting a business and share the responsibility of starting a business. So if you actually want to kind of like compare it to like startups, startups get co-founders, right? And they get co-founders specifically to help kind of spread the weight of the requirements that you need to do to grow the business. And we're seeing that so much more with group practices. So we have, physicians starting with 3 physicians, 2 physicians, 4 physicians at the same time who are wanting to lead together. And to me, that's brilliant, because going in it alone is going to have so much more weight on top of you that you're going to feel the responsibility and all the obligations. But going in it already as a group, it's going to be a lot easier for them to be able to carry that weight, and their probability of success is going to be higher, in my opinion.
Awesome. Very interesting. That's a cool insight. I feel like you wouldn't see anywhere else.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, I really, really appreciate the time, Dr. Amaro. Where can, if anyone that's listening to this is interested in starting a private practice, dipping their toe, or going to be finishing residency soon and want to get right into practice and see some of the solutions that Ease has to offer, where can people find your company and you?
Yeah, so we're at eastpractice.com, and you can find us at East Practice on all social media. So whether it's LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, it's at East Practice. And so, yeah, just come to us. Like, you can send me a direct message. I'll respond. My email as well. Whatever's easier for you. I'm here to help. This is literally what our focus and our mission is helping doctors start their practices. So that's who we work with. We don't work with any other businesses except private practices. So if you're looking to start a practice, check us out, eastpractice.com.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me.